think I'm gonna call this series The Courage to Create. My name is Keston of Keystone Productions. I am doing a how-to. How did I get it done? You know, it's a video revisiting some of my music videos that I've done back in the day. And I was watching a gentleman on YouTube. I'm gonna list him, but thank you for inspiring me to revisit some of my content as a creative, as a music video director, as a filmmaker, as a videographer, photographer, and just revisit the journey. You know, COVID has taught us many things, that life is precious, and share the knowledge and the wisdom of things I've been able to accomplish as a filmmaker with no particular, there's a book I read called The Courage to Create. And within that context, I was able to just go out, you know, start, just get it done. I know people talk about cameras all of the time and what my camera can do and dynamic range. Whether you shoot with an iPhone or Android, if you could tell a story and you could bring a viewer through a journey, then you're a filmmaker. Without being able to use my intellect, use my creative intellect to tell stories, to see things in a way that made sense, and to come up with treatments and to coordinate models and actors and rappers and, you know, people and have the logistics down, then you can have the best camera in the world, but if you can't tell a story, it really doesn't mean anything. So I'm gonna go into this video. It's called The African Holocaust. It was shot very close to the Freddie Gray riots. So to kind of give you a little bit of insight, it's about a young guy coming into the fold of knowledge of who he is and discovering his true identity. And in that, I use the symbolism. Kareem Ali always teases me about symbolism. All right, so you see the young man, he's walking on North Avenue where the riots happen, not too far from that CVS. I love this part where she looks over right here. Her eyes fell right on the drum. I saw her eyes cut like that, and it was just like right on the drum. There's a beautiful film called The Cutting Edge. I'll link it in the description. If you want to learn anything about editing and paying attention to the minute details to get you through an edit, The Cutting Edge will teach you a lot about how to splice film, technique, so on and so forth. So here we go. So the chain she has on the chain, that represents slavery. She's partially clothed, that being stripped of all of our ideals and coming over in our nakedness and everything being stolen from us. So that's why she's partially, quote unquote, nude. You know, here she is, domesticated, that clothesline with the images that are floating behind her, and she's looking back, she's identifying where she's coming from. This flag that she's putting on is, you know, we've been cloaked in the history of this country as you know, as blacks living in America. So she's wrapping herself in the American experience. Going back to the domesticated images of black people hung on a line, a clothesline, represents the servitude images that this country have a tendency to look at us in the light of. You know, it's like, you know, you are the butlers and the maids and the maintenance people and my mechanic, never as an intellectual. So that's why I put those images on a clothesline. And then, you know, I had to splice all of this African strong, whether good or bad, images, you know, in here. Because people talk about Africa as like it's Wakanda, but Africa, like any other place in the world, has issues. Kareem Ali is playing a teacher, you know, and we spliced him as playing a teacher as well as his performance scene. Once again, I didn't have the best lenses, so some of the looks are just like, ugh. This was a while ago. I shot this with a Nikon D5100. Get a good YouTube downloader. You'll find a lot of, if you're creating this type of content where you're splicing videos and you're splicing animation, get a good YouTube downloader. I know the quality is going to be compressed and so on and so forth, but once again, if you're telling a story and the elements help you tell that story, use it. I've watched plenty well-shot documentaries with old footage in it. So stop giving me this high dynamic range speech and everything has to be perfect. If it helps you tell the story, use it. And then I use this, at the time, I'm kind of learning about color, but I use this intentional green tinge to kind of match with the chalkboard and things like that. And then I just put this green hue on it to kind of give the savannas of Africa. I was trying to think like that. I watched some stuff on colorism and the kind of subconscious things you could plant with certain colors and feel. Yeah, Kareem Ali, get into him as an artist, man. Dope lyricist. This had a lot, over 250,000 views. He got more views on Facebook than he did YouTube. But YouTube, for me, I don't know. I got most of my views on Facebook versus YouTube. But now I'm consciously coming back to this YouTube platform to be more of a YouTuber in the sense. Because going back to Facebook momentarily, but on Facebook you have a lot of groups, a lot of specialized groups, and you could dump your content, especially conscious-based content as a hip-hop artist, into groups that can analyze it, share it, versus the sea of YouTube. YouTube is great. Obviously, I'm putting this content on YouTube, but here we go. And we snuck into the Blacks and Wax Museum in Baltimore. Because DSLR looks like a DSLR, it doesn't look like a video camera. And I wanted to put her on the flag over there, laying on the flag, and I intentionally had her look into the camera at one point. Like, you see me, you see what this is about. She has to get up from the burden of this, the burden of the American experience and walk into the fullness of who she is despite the history of America cloaked on her back. That's what that's about right here. And it's kind of like this whole black girl magic and being a superhero despite the burden of your past. Symbolism, love symbolism. Obviously Malcolm X had to use images of him as you hear his voice throughout the video. Once again, strong images of Africa and, Nelson Mandela. It is what it is. Africa is not Wakanda. Africa's Africa. There's greatness. It is also poverty. There's also poor health. It's just like it mirrors what's happening in this country. Yeah, finding this animation was phenomenal. Because it matched all of the names, and it was such a teaching tool to show people all these different parts of Africa versus people seeing Africa as Africa. It's like Africa is made up of several different countries within the continent. And I love this matching of these spears hitting the shield to the rhythm of the track. Just little things like that, little details like that, Those are the things that I stayed up 4, 5, 6, 7 hours breaking down. You see the British, the dead Africans, being slaughtered by the fact that they didn't have guns. They were outmatched. There's a beautiful documentary called Guns, Germs, and Steel. If you have an opportunity to see that, that'll give you some great insight on what Europeans brought to the continent of Africa when they came. Guns, Germs, and Steel. Very profound documentary film. A great eye-opener. All Things Fall Apart, read that in college. It's referenced here. I had to put that in there because it's about a strong African man who, he had all of the wives, the land, a Kwanko. If you read All Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe, you'll know that story. And it's just, the Roots made an album called All Things Fall Apart. But if you read that book, it just kind of tells you that we all have our strengths and our strong moments. But, life is about temperance and things move on. So that's like this whole ideal of slavery and the African American experience. All things are falling apart in reference to that as well. So we are no longer in that category. We're thinkers, intellects. Once again, breaking this ideal of servitude. Once again, strong images from the Blacks and Wax Museum. Africans, slaves rising up, overthrowing their overseers, overthrowing their slave masters at that one point. Love this spear scene right here. Put another spear through you, and the way that I line that up, the timing, once again, timing and editing is so important. Watch the cutting edge. Watch the cutting edge. I'll put the link in the description. watch the cutting edge. You know, Ku Klux Klan, walking in front of the Capitol. Ku Klux Klan walking in front of the Capitol. I'll leave that alone. Moving on, so I love how this whole scene, the end of the video, is about to break down. This to me has always been mega powerful. Once again, using the power of film, using your creative intellect. She's starting to strip these ideals of servitude and getting these images off the line. You know, it's like, let's start tearing down these symbolic images that have kept us psychologically brainwashed for a long time. A woman being hanged, you know, scars on a slave back, the gagging of a woman's mouth. She rips it, love it. Right here, had to pause it right here so you can see it. But this whole ripping this images of the woman's gag mouth and ripping the image of slave to sell, and you can see that one eye, this whole third eye, like I'm awakening, you know, that happened by accident. But it when I saw it, I was like, oh my God, you know what I mean? And watching the clothespins being now stripped bare, you know, there's no more clothes to pick. There's no more servitude to be happening, you know what I mean? Like, let's get rid of those ideals. Once again, Ali paying homage to Muhammad Ali. I love the dancing in here. It's all upbeat, you know, this is a powerful mood. I loved it. I don't know how this happened, but that woman's nose and his nose have a similar profile. And when I saw that, once again, little things you find when you're closely paying attention to editing, you'll find things like that. He's coming back. He's meeting with the person that's giving him the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. And this closeout scene to me is pivotal. Here she is. Oh my God. An electronic viewfinder back in the day would have made a wealth of difference, but I didn't have it, you know, so I was just trusting my eye, and some of the exposure is off. But going back into this powerful symbolism of the scene, looking back into the history of who she is and where she comes from. And the American ideal is being peeled away from her because she's coming into knowledge, wisdom. You know, the American flag falls on the floor. Don't be disrespected. You have to understand what we're doing here. We're telling this story. Then you see the ripped up images again of slaves and servitude. She's standing in the midst of tearing apart these old world ideas and coming into her newness. The chain falls at your feet. And then she's being adorned by this beautiful garb, being prepared to walk into the fullness of who she is. And walking into the fullness of who you are is what this story is about, this music video is about. And that's the end. So I wanted to basically close out with a paper I had to write in college about, because this is called the African Holocaust. And I had to write a paper about the African Holocaust versus the Jewish Holocaust. And I will say that I remember identifying that there was no measurement of suffering that could be equated in regards to who suffers more. Suffering is suffering. So to have a record called the African Holocaust, reflecting on what has happened to us as Africans in this country, is fitting. Just like it's fitting for a museum to celebrate, you know, what happened in the Holocaust. Celebrate what I mean is them coming out of it. So this music video represents us coming out of some things as far as what's happening in this country. So just kind of wrapping things up on how I did it. You know, going back then, I shot with a Nikon D5100. I had a Tamron 50 3.5. I had a 35 millimeter 1.8. And I was just so in love with this idea of bokeh and so in love with cinematic looks and so on and so forth. Not really having, you know, going back into, I wanted to create, you know, as you can see, there's a lot of technical mistakes in this, but the story trumps the technicalities. So if you're starting out, you don't know what you're doing, let your story trump the technicalities. You can learn the technicalities going forward. But if you have strong story, work on storytelling, because storytelling is is the core of everything to do with the entertainment industry, everything to do as a filmmaker. So, you know, just a quick breakdown as far as everything that I'm filming with today. Nikon Z6, Tamron 35mm SP, Comica lavalier mic, H4n running into the Comica to give, you know, because the preamps on the Z6 are not that sweet. And I'll list everything else I use in, you know, as far as my lighting. And yes, this is my first time. It's my first one. So don't get on me. I don't have all of the pretty lights like all of the YouTubers. I'm working on that. You know, I'm definitely working on the whole ambiance and creating just this whole beautiful YouTuber feel. But once again, I couldn't wait. I wanted to start telling my stories on how I got it done. You know, COVID has taught me that time is short, you know, like share your knowledge with the rest of the world, help you get ahead of the line because, you know, when I started out, I made a lot of mistakes as an early filmmaker, as an early as a music video director. I made a lot of mistakes. So what I want to do going forward is teach you guys how to avoid those mistakes, harness your strengths, tell great stories because individuals want, you know, we're wired for story. Going back into the history of Africa, griot story, we're wired for stories. We like to hear stories. We want to hear the beginning, middle, and end. That's how we operate. We want to know what's happening. Like, you ever watch a story and then you don't know what's going to happen and it irritates you, or somebody calls you while you're watching the movie, you're like, man, I want to know what's going to happen next. So begin to tap into that energy of creating stories of what's going to happen next and stall your audience until you can get to the end and understand the fundamentals of storytelling, okay? So I'm going to wrap up. This is Keston with the Courage to Create. And you're gonna get more content. I have a lot of music videos to cover and go through. So I'm gonna start rolling them out. I might do 3 or 4 a month. Just leading up into where I'm at now as a filmmaker. So if you're in the DMV area, you want a music video produced, you want somebody who can tell a great story, and you have a budget to get everything in place to tell that story, then reach out to me on Instagram. Follow me on Instagram at Keystone Productions. Subscribe, do all of those things that people do. I think I'm gonna call this series The Courage to Create.